What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench podcast network and channel, giving a shout out to the rest of the crew: Shy, Kelvin, Jermaine, KB Film Room, Big Dog Talk Sports. That's right, that's right. For everyone who's tuning in, we hope that you support Behind the Bench, continue supporting Behind the Bench, become a subscriber, and help make the show the best that it can be. Now I just saw Pete win of this earlier this evening, right? And I didn't know this was taking place throughout social media. It's like some pseudo movement that's been perpetrated by a select few, a select representation. The fan support of a certain active player in the NBA. And as I've done videos in the past about, and this is something I start, you notice little nuances that was taking place, right? And see, when you really respect the history of something, I'm talking about just in general, the good and the bad, the positive and the negative, the highs and the lows, the peaks and the valleys. You come to appreciate that because it's never all good and it's never all bad in the grand scheme of things, right? But when it comes to Michael Jordan, I remember this was around, this is 2024. So this was about 10 years ago, around 2014. I came across an article by a sports columnist who started a blog online, a sports blog. And this was prior to the start of the NBA playoffs back in 2014. And he was talking about Michael Jordan's career. And as I said in my video that I did a couple days ago, I said that the real cash cow is Michael Jordan. They talk about Michael Jordan as if he's still playing in the league. When he retired 20 years ago, they talk more about Michael Jordan now than they did when he retired. In 93, and when I say 93, I'm talking about 1993, 1998, and 2003. They talk about his name is mentioned more now than it was when he retired on those three occasions. Okay. So I read this guy's blog, and he stated that Michael Jordan's career playoff average was like 27 points a game. I said, whoa. I said, wait a minute. He got to be jiving. I said, man, basketball fans back then, even if the Bulls were not their favorite, I'm talking about, I'm not trying to differentiate and say, one representation of fans is better than the next or have more knowledge or whatnot. I'm not even going down that road. But me personally, I said I knew that, like I said, the Chicago Bulls is not my squad. But Michael Jordan, his talent was so immense that you couldn't help but keep up with his success as a player, his dominance, I should say. So I said, wait a minute. He didn't average 27 points a game throughout his career in the playoffs. I said he averaged 33 points. Matter of fact, his scoring average actually increased from the regular season to the postseason. And then it increased again from the postseason to the finals. So how was it that he averaged only 27 points a game in the playoffs when he was a career 33.4 point per game score upon his first retirement? That was his average throughout the regular season. He has the highest point per game average in NBA history in regular season, postseason, and finals. That was a misleading representation of his career. But that started 10 years ago. And you start picking up on things, man, cats would be saying, you'd be like, whoa, that ain't right. That's not right. But when it started, you thought, okay, man, maybe they doing it in jest. You know what I'm saying? No, man. This is something that's been brewing for 10 years. And I remember when I would conclude with other basketball fans that I came across, and when I realized, I said, this is the beginning stages of trying to erase Michael Jordan from history. And when sometimes when an individual has gained a lot of experience and they follow the circumstance for a long time, they can pick up on the nuances. Some people can pick up on it immediately. Some people may be able to pick up on it like in a relatively timely fashion. And then most people may not believe what you're saying until it actually starts happening. And then eventually we all see what the real deal is when it unveils itself. And then a lot of times when it's self-serving or if it's not genuine, that attempt falls by the wayside. So what I'm saying is, man, they are trying to erase Michael Jordan from history. This ain't about, it's one thing, okay, like I said, everybody has a favorite player. That's not an issue. You may think a player is better than another player, but usually, that's in the context of who's playing in the current time, who is the active player. You normally compare one active player to another active player. Well, they know, I'm talking about, there's some influential voices behind the scene that's trying to eliminate this man from basketball conscious. So it ain't about just trying to prove that someone's better than Jordan. No, they're trying to erase him from history. And the reason they're trying to do it is he set the bar at the absolute apex level. Not at the highest level, but the apex level. Because for all practical purpose, contrary to the attempt of, these cynical voices saying, well, Jordan never beat the Boston Celtics or whatnot. If you use logic and really study this man's career, as far as a progression of starting as a rookie until he retired, the arc of his career, starting from rock bottom and reaching the very pinnacle of the sport, you can argue as far as his association with the sport and his talent in elevating the sport of basketball, that Jordan's career was as close to flawless as you're going to see. When I say flawless, I'm not talking about hitting every jump shot. I'm not talking about winning every game. What I'm talking about is, what you hope that an athlete can ultimately achieve in a sport, he did that times 10. Like, when they say, well, he couldn't beat Detroit, well, it wasn't like Jordan was in his 10th season and couldn't beat them. The first time he faced the Pistons, that was Jordan's 4th season. The first time he faced the Pistons in the playoffs. And every year, they got closer and closer to beating Detroit. 88, 5 games. 89, 6 games after taking a 2-1 lead. In 1990, it went the distance, 7 games. And then in 91, they overcame the Pistons and beat them in 4 games. So what I'm getting at, man, is a lot of these influential voices that are now commentating about the NBA, and in particular, the NBA of decades past or past eras, they have done a major disservice to the youth generation. Now, the thing about it is, a lot of these fans, they embrace what's being said, but it's to their detriment. Do you think about this, man? Just picture this in your mind. You are a young person trying to figure out your place in the world. And I'm not trying to be philosophical. I'm just trying to, I'm trying to create this. How can I say? I'm trying to paint a visual. Okay. You gravitate to someone. And normally, when you're young, you're going to gravitate to someone who is a full-fledged adult. If you are a young male teenager and you see someone on TV or an athlete or whatnot, or a musician, and for some reason you gravitate to that person, and you're gravitating to what they're saying, right? And you're being led to take that as the gospel or as the unequivocal truth. Can you imagine a situation where, when it comes to the world of sports and the NBA, where you've been presented something going on 10 years plus, and it turns out that not only was it not true, but it was never true was being said? How would you feel? Eventually, it's going to create a level of resentment, and the people that have been given the platform to spew falsehoods and misnomers, they will receive backlash in the end, because the premise and the false narratives they've been kicking out over the past decade, when it crashes, it's going to crash. And the youth generation that has been indoctrinated by these words, they're going to be like, what the heck is going on? Why is everybody attacking me or being critical towards me? Right? And then when they really sit down and come across the truth, they're going to know it immediately, because there's not going to be any ulterior motive. The truth don't need that. The truth is absolute. And the people that's been spewing this nonsense, they're going to receive a level of backlash that they're not going to be able to adjust to. That's where we at. And I know it's just sports, but sports, for those who embrace it and gravitate to it, it's a part of life. Like these professional athletes, man, they spent their livelihoods to pursue their craft, right? So when you disparage a man, that's what you can't do. Especially if you didn't have an opportunity or you wasn't born or was living during a time where that person was active. So what I'm getting at is, man, now all of a sudden, you got a wave of fans of a particular player that's coming out the box, and they're trying to start this movement as if they're doing something revolutionary, and they're proclaiming that we are done with the 90s. And now they're saying that Michael Jordan had no left hand. But you can tell, if you was a fan of the NBA during the 80s and 90s, you can tell that the youth generation who's responding in this fashion, they picked up on what was said about Jordan in false terms, and they've embraced it. But with the evolution of social media, particularly YouTube, well, if a fan of coming up today feels that Michael Jordan didn't have a left hand or couldn't dribble his left hand, all they have to do, I bet you every single game that Michael Jordan's ever played, it's on YouTube. And if they sat there, and I know it's hard to do because it's really hard to, watch a sporting event that was 30 years prior and the outcome has already been determined. So it's kind of hard to go back. Now, if you grew up during that time and reflect on it, yeah, it's easier for that person to do it, to maybe watch footage of a player from the past. But if they was to do that and see that Michael Jordan not only had a left hand, but often overcame double teams and triple teams because of the fact that he had a left hand and could dribble with his left and go opposite from his right to score. Because often that's what he had to do. I've never seen nothing like this in my life, man. And the thing about it is, like in the beginning, man, you kind of chuckled because like I said, you saw the origins of what they were trying to do, but you in your mind you like, there's no way in the world they're gonna try to take it to this extent. Well, that's where we at right now. So now they're gonna try to say we're done with the 90s because not only they trying to wipe out Jordan, they're trying to take out his whole era. And you know why? It's because Jordan dominated that decade. That's why. But they want to use Scottie Pippen, to say, well, Scottie Pippen carried Jordan. So that means if you're going to say that you're done with the 90s, then there's no need to bring up Scottie Pippen no more because he played in the 90s. You see, this is where the logic cuts through all that smoke and mirrors, because that's all this is, man. But I'm gonna tell you what I'm done with as a fan, a lifelong fan of the NBA. Like I said, I don't compare eras. I love all of it. outside of the super team era. I didn't grow up during the 50s. I didn't grow up during the 60s. I was not living in. But when you study the rich history of the NBA, you come to appreciate. Actually, learning about those players from the 50s and 60s, that solidified my passion of eventually becoming a lifelong fan. So I can embrace the 50s. I can embrace the 60s. I can embrace the 70s, during which I, became a fan, and then the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. And in this current decade, as the league is slowly moving beyond the super team era, it's been very difficult for the league to do that. But nonetheless, it will happen. Under much resistance, but eventually it will happen. So what I'm trying to say is, if you don't have the 90s, you don't have now. You don't have the present without the past. So if you're going to say I'm done with the 90s, then what you're saying is you're done with the history of the NBA. So what now? These talking heads and these pundits are trying to convince you that the NBA started in 2010? When it started 60 years prior? Like I said, I don't know every single player that's ever participated in the NBA. But I'm not going to sit here, man, and waste my time and energy to trash past eras. Because you know what? For the youth generation has been misled into doing that, well, eventually the era that they've grown up watching, that era is going to be trash. And it's going to be trash in a more distinct manner, and it's going to happen in a faster. It's going to happen in a more immediate fashion after this current era has run its course. They won't be able to catch their breath. So if you're done with the 90s, what you're saying is those expansion teams that, he trying to crap on. Well, if that's the case, you wouldn't have the Miami Heat today. You wouldn't have the Orlando Magic that went to the finals in 95. They went to the finals again in 2009. That are right now 10 games above 500. And if the season ended today, they would be a playoff team outright without having to advance through the play-in to get there. That means you're going to discredit or disown the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are in second place or tied. No, they followed it right now. They a game and a half out of first place. They're in third place right now. But nonetheless, they've had the best season of their franchise history so far. So those teams only exist because they originated back in the 90s. See, it makes no sense. Just like every team that exists now had to have a point of origin. But all of this is done. All this wasteful energy is being done to discredit one basketball player. But the irony is, what they're trying to cast or associate with the 90s, or which they think made the NBA digress or devolve, actually took place over the past 15 seasons. That's the irony. That's the crux. That's the crux. See, the longer this era of super teaming and stacking the deck and all the shady tactics that are used to or exercise to produce these win now scenarios, well, the longer this goes on, the longer the youth generation that have only been exposed to this, the longer they're going to try to attack previous eras. But see, before the super team era, fans of the 2000s didn't trash the 90s. Fans of the 90s didn't trash the 80s. Fans of the 80s didn't trash the 70s. Fans of the 70s didn't trash the 60s. And that just lets you know when you're stuck in this malaise and you're trying to discredit the past, that lets you know the sport has become, well, the league has become stagnant. That's what that lets you know. The league has a great opportunity through this youth infusion of talent to move forward. It's up to the league to decide whether they want to do that or not. To where they don't keep on trying to harp on what happened 30 years ago. Or why a 23-year-old Michael Jordan in his second year coming off a foot injury couldn't beat the 86 Celtics, who was one of the top 3 greatest teams to ever do it. It's old, it's tired, it's played out, it's toxic energy. And that's why so many fans have become cynical of the NBA and they no longer watch it. It's because they're trashing the past. If you try to eliminate the past, you don't have nothing. How would a fan growing up today of the youth generation, how would they feel 10 years from now if a future wave of NBA fans trash their era constantly? How would they feel? See, it's an insult. See, you can't tell me that Michael Jordan had no left hand when I watched his whole career. And he had every move in the book. He was the most fundamental, as Kenny Smith said, Kenny the Jet Smith, who's been providing insight into NBA basketball on TNT, actually coming up close to 20 years. He was teammates of Michael Jordan in college in North Carolina. And he said Michael Jordan was the most fundamentally sound basketball player ever. So now, are fans going to discount what Kenny Smith has said? See, it's getting to the point, man, the situation is calling for, look, like I said, I believe the reason why a lot of basketball fans have or putting time in producing their channels on social media is to get the word out about the truth of the NBA in the past. Because we feel insulted that you got voices on these airwaves and you can tell they didn't watch the NBA back then. They just cutting and pasting. They didn't really watch it. They didn't know what it was about. I'm not saying that they are unable to get a full understanding, but the problem is they don't want to do that. They have no desires to do that. So that's why you got this clash between older fans and younger fans as of right now. But during the 80s and 90s,
Kids was watching the NBA with their like if you was a male, uh, a young male teenager growing up watching the NBA, either you're watching it with your father, your uncle, or some adult male figure that was close to you, that you knew well or whatnot. Well, that's not happening right now. But see, in the end, the history is going to win out anyway. Because when all this crash, they're going to have to rely on something to reestablish itself and get back to basics. No narratives, no innuendo, no agenda drive, no ulterior motive. That's why the NBA, it feels like that is going by the wayside, and it don't have to be. But when you try to erase a man who reached the apex and achieved what he achieved, that's an insult to everybody. That's an insult to the people who trying to erase him. And they don't even realize it. In the end, the effort won't work. So they can sit there and say they're done with the 90s. Well, I'm done with super teams. I'm done with stacking the deck. I'm done with organizations being forced to have to give up everything in sight and in between to try to placate an individual to pursue an ambition to win in an all-time win now shortcut scenario that's not working. I'm tired of. I'm just tired of all the misrepresentation. So they're tired. I'm tired. But see, a fan that's in my position, we got a right to be tired. When the fans say they're tired of the 90s, the reason why they're tired is because they've been misled. And they're tired for having to defend a position that don't have any credibility. I don't want to say no credibility, but it's not built on anything that's foundational. That's why they're tired. So, like I said, I'm not trying to be wordy or anything, man. I just want to share that real quick. But it's almost like you got to laugh, but at the same time, it's not funny, man. Look, this is 2024. Why are they constantly talking about what they think that a player didn't do back in 1986? That'd be the equivalent of if this was 1996, you're talking about what a player did or didn't do, or what you perceived that they didn't do back in 1966, when the outcome has already been determined. See, that's how baseless this is. That's how senseless all this is. Because the player who they're trying to erase, he raised the bar so high, and he never lost with money on the line. So you got to pick in pride and try to identify when he did lose. But it wasn't like he really lost. It was the natural arc of a career of a player starting from the ground and working his way up year after year after year. And didn't take no shortcuts. But what they won't tell you is, and I'm going to close with this. What they won't tell you is, when Michael Jordan won his first, when he was on the cusp and eventually crossed that finish line and won his first ever championship, he was celebrated by the entire basketball world. He became the most popular athlete on the planet. Not because of hype, not because of media manipulation, but because of the inspiration of the talent that he blessed the world with. That still And the influence of that still stands to this day. Like I said, Bulls are not my favorite team. Kobe Bryant, the late Kobe Bryant, has been my favorite player since I first saw him play basketball before he entered the NBA. But at the end of the day, I'm the type of person, man, I love upholding the history, man, because the more you do that, the more understanding that you have of the sport. So in the end, the attempt to disown the 90s, it will not work. And when all this clutter ends, man, the truth will stand. So I just wanted to share this real quick, man. Until next time, this is JB for BTB Behind the Bench.